Disabled little girl, abandoned by her mom at the bus stop. What the lonely CEO did will shock you. The wind cut through the empty streets like knives, slapping against faded billboards and flickering signs. At bus stop number 47, a single streetlight buzzed above, casting a weak, yellow glow over the cracked pavement. Snow had started to fall, lightly at first, then steadier, dusting over trash bins, benches, and the shoulders of rushing commuters who kept their heads down and collars up. And yet, in the middle of that busy sidewalk, there she was, a little girl. She sat alone in a rusted wheelchair, dwarfed by her heavy coat and a tattered red dress whose seams had begun to unravel. The left wheel of the chair tilted outward slightly, causing her to sit at an awkward slant, dangerously close to tipping. Her legs, thin and folded in, trembled under the weight of the cold. One foot slipped from the footrest and hung limp. She could not have been more than 3 years old. In her tiny hands, she clutched a bracelet made of wooden beads, cheap and worn, but carefully made. She turned it slowly between her fingers, as if drawing comfort from the familiar texture. Her lips were turning pale, her cheeks blotched red from the cold, but she did not scream. She did not cry. She only mumbled, over and over again, a small, broken whisper. "Mommy, Mommy, don't leave me." Pedestrians passed without stopping. A man in a puffer jacket gave her a quick glance and then looked away. A couple slowed down, but after one look at the wheelchair and her trembling hands, hurried off in silence. A group of teenagers laughed from the corner and one of them muttered, "Creepy little thing," before tossing an empty soda can nearby. The wheelchair shifted slightly as the breeze picked up again. One loose wheel squeaked, tilting her just enough to make her clutch the sides in panic. Still, no one stepped in. No one asked. No one helped. Only one question lingered in the air, unspoken but loud in the minds of any who saw her. Where is her mother? Why is a disabled child alone at night, freezing in the snow? And that was when a sleek black SUV pulled up across the street. The car door opened, and a man stepped out. Damien Hawthorne, 32, tall, clean-cut, and dressed in a sharp black suit, barely noticed the wind as it snapped at his coat. He walked with purpose, precise, direct. His phone buzzed in his pocket, but he ignored it. Then his eyes landed on her, the girl in red. He stopped. She looked up, slow and quiet, as if she did not expect kindness, but had learned to recognize attention. Her eyes were large, but not wide with fear, just tired, expectant, like she had already decided what people would do next. Nothing. Damien hesitated only a moment before stepping closer. He crouched down, his expensive pants brushing against the wet ground so that his eyes met hers. No towering over, no looming, just level. "Hey," he said softly. "Are you all right?" She blinked. Her lips quivered. Then she whispered, so faintly he had to lean closer. "Sir, Mommy said she would come back." But she didn't. The wind blew harder now, carrying the sound of her voice into the empty space between them. Damien's jaw tightened. He reached out slowly and touched the edge of her wheelchair handle. It was cold, freezing. The metal bit at his skin. He looked around. No one else had stopped. Not a soul. He glanced down again. The child's hands gripped the bracelet like it was the last piece of her world. Something in him shifted. A memory? A shadow? He did not say. But his fingers curled around the wheelchair grip, this time not just to steady it, but to claim it, to act. He stood up and removed his scarf, then knelt again and carefully wrapped it around her neck. She did not resist. She leaned into the warmth. Damien's expression remained unreadable, but his actions spoke louder. He looked up at the sky as the snow thickened. Then, without another word, he wheeled her gently toward his car, and all the while, her soft voice echoed behind them, like a fragile thread caught in the wind. "Mommy, Mommy, don't leave me." Damien placed the little girl gently into the back seat of his car. The heat was already on, but she was still trembling. Without a word, he removed his scarf and carefully wrapped it around her neck. adjusting it with slow, deliberate hands. She coughed, a shallow, raspy sound, and winced. Damien reached for a bottle of water in the console and unscrewed the cap. "Here," he said softly, tipping the water toward her lips. Slowly. Her small hands were too weak to hold the bottle, so he held it for her, watching as she sipped, then leaned her head back in exhaustion. Minutes later, they arrived at a private hospital. Damien walked through the emergency doors with the child in his arms, ignoring the surprised glances of the night staff. 3 years old, he told the attending nurse. Cold exposure, possible underlying medical conditions. The doctors moved fast. They checked her vitals, examined her joints, touched her legs. Damien stood nearby, arms crossed tightly, jaw clenched. He didn't speak unless spoken to. "She has mild hypothermia, early signs of malnutrition," the doctor said, scribbling on a clipboard. "Her left hip is inflamed, developmental. Dysplasia, maybe? We'll need x-rays to confirm. Has she been seen by a specialist?" Damien's voice was low. "Not recently. Is she your daughter?" A pause. Then, "No." The doctor didn't push further. After the tests, Damien signed every form placed in front of him. He didn't blink at the total. When the billing nurse asked for identification, he handed her his black titanium card and said, "Run everything through that." Later that night, he brought her home. His penthouse sat high above the city, a world of glass, stone, and silence. It was spotless, perfect, empty. He set the child down in the guest bedroom, then wandered into the kitchen, suddenly unsure of himself. He opened the fridge, searched cabinets. No baby food, no formula, no small spoons or plastic bowls. Eventually, he found some milk, warmed it awkwardly on the stove, and poured it into a cup. It was too hot. He let it cool, then brought it to her bedside. She was already half asleep, curled beneath a thick blanket he'd pulled from the linen closet. Her little hand still clutched the wooden bead bracelet. He stood there for a long moment, watching her chest rise and fall. Her lips had regained some color. The tremble in her fingers had eased. Damien lowered himself onto the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, and exhaled. Then, almost to himself, he muttered, "What kind of mother could abandon an angel like this?" Morning came quietly. Damien hadn't slept. The moment the sun rose, he called the police station. "Did the traffic cameras catch anything at the bus stop last night?" he asked. A few hours later, a detective arrived at his door with a flash drive. Damien inserted it into his laptop and watched. It was dark. Snow fell. People moved past the bus stop without looking. Then, a figure. A woman. She wore a thin coat. Her blonde hair fell past her shoulders in loose waves. In her arms, she carried the child, bundled in a threadbare blanket. Damien leaned in. The woman bent down and gently placed the girl into the wheelchair. She adjusted the child's scarf, brushed her hair back, and then paused. She dropped to her knees, placed both hands on the girl's cheeks, and kissed her forehead. Long, trembling, her shoulders shook, her hands lingered. She touched the wooden bracelet one last time. And then, she stood up and walked away. She never looked back. Damien froze. His fists clenched at his sides. He stood abruptly, sending the chair scraping against the floor. "She will be held accountable," he said through gritted teeth. "I'll press charges. No mother has the right to do that." But then, he hit pause. His eyes locked on the frame where she touched the bracelet. Her fingers curled around it like it was a lifeline. Her lips moved. Damien played the moment again. And again. The pain on her face. The way she touched the child's hair. His anger cracked. Just slightly. "What pain," he whispered, "makes a mother do something like that?" The room was barely a room at all. Just 4 cracked walls, a mattress on the floor, and a single dim bulb swinging overhead. Rain tapped lightly against the grimy window, muffling the quiet sobs that filled the space. Alina Marlowe sat hunched in the corner, arms wrapped tightly around her knees, her face buried in the worn fabric of her coat. Her long blonde hair, damp from the night air, clung to her cheeks in loose, tangled strands. She looked like a ghost of herself, hollow-eyed, skin pale, lips trembling. In her hands, she held a tiny red sock, too small for anything but a toddler. She pressed it to her chest like it might anchor her to reality, but nothing could quiet the ache in her heart. "Evie," she whispered. "Mommy's sorry." A flash of memory struck her like lightning. Her own childhood, her father, drunk again, shouting. The bruises, the slammed doors, the sound of glass shattering. She had promised herself she would be different. She would be a better parent. She would protect her child, even if the world never protected her. But life had other plans. At 23, Alina had gotten pregnant by a man who swore he loved her. 2 months later, he disappeared. No calls, no letters, just gone. And so she did what she always did. She survived. She waited tables at a rundown diner during the day, stitched cheap garments at night, and cleaned offices on weekends. Her life was built on no sleep, dollar ramen, and worn-out shoes. But none of it mattered, because every time she came home and saw Evie's smile, the exhaustion melted. Until Evie stopped walking, until the doctor said hip dysplasia and handed her a stack of medical paperwork she could not begin to afford. $40,000 in treatment, multiple appointments, therapy, medications. Alina applied for government aid. She was denied. She begged her manager for more hours. He said she was too slow. When she asked for time off to take Evie to a clinic, he fired her. Next came the eviction notice, the unpaid bills, the fridge that hummed but stayed empty. She remembered holding Evie in her arms one night, the child's little body burning with fever, and in that darkness, a cruel thought crept in. What if someone else could give her a better life? What if the only way to love her was to let her go? The next morning, Alina packed a bag with diapers, Evie's favorite blanket, and a bottle of formula. She dressed her in the only clean dress left, the red one, now a little too small, and tied her hair in soft pigtails. Then she took her daughter to the bus stop. Her hands shook the entire time. The air was ice against her skin, her coat barely closed. Evie sat quietly, confused, blinking against the cold. Alina bent down, adjusted the blanket around her daughter's legs, and placed both hands on her cheeks. "Mommy loves you. I'm sorry." She kissed her forehead, her lips trembling. Evie stared up at her, eyes wide, trusting. Alina stood quickly. She couldn't look back. If she did, she would never leave. She ran. Now, alone in her tiny apartment, Alina pressed the sock to her lips and cried without restraint, guttural, raw, like a mother torn in two. "What kind of monster leaves her baby?" she whispered into the dark. "What kind of mother am I?" She curled into herself, rocking back and forth. "I couldn't feed you. I couldn't fix your legs, but someone else can. Someone better. I gave you a chance, didn't I?" Her voice cracked. "I hope you're warm. I hope you're loved." In another part of the city, Damien Hawthorne replayed the security footage again, watching the woman with blonde hair kiss the child, touch the wooden bracelet, and walk away with shoulders hunched in grief. It wasn't coldness in her eyes. It was heartbreak. And for the first time, he wondered, not with anger, but with something else. Pity? Understanding? Recognition? Because once, a long time ago, he too had been left behind. The knock came late in the evening. Damien stood at the door of his penthouse, his jaw tight, shoulders tense. The officer beside him gave a slight nod before stepping aside. There she was, Alina Marlowe. Her blonde hair was pulled into a loose, messy bun, strands clinging to her cheeks damp with cold air. Her coat was too thin for the temperature. Her face, pale and gaunt, looked like it had not seen sleep in days. Damien took one step forward, his voice like ice. "You know you could be arrested, right? That little girl you left was minutes from hypothermia." Alina didn't speak. Her knees buckled slightly. She caught herself on the doorframe, fingers shaking. "Please," she whispered, voice hoarse. "Is Evie? Is she okay?" "She's alive, because someone found her in time, Damien replied sharply. Tears sprang to her eyes. She closed them briefly, as if holding back a scream. I just wanted someone to give her a better life, she breathed. Damien opened his mouth, ready to accuse, to demand justice, to unleash all the fury from his own childhood abandonment. But then he looked at her. Really looked. Her lips were blue. Her hands, bare, were red and raw from cold. Her body, though upright, was trembling like a leaf. And her eyes. God, those eyes. They were not cruel, not vacant. They were terrified. A mother in pain. He exhaled slowly. Then, in silence, removed his heavy coat and gently draped it over her shoulders. Come inside, he said. It's freezing. Alina blinked in disbelief, hugging the coat around her. Why are you being kind to me? Damien didn't answer. Not yet. They sat in the living room, across from each other. The space between them felt wide, empty, yet full of all the questions neither dared to ask. Finally, he spoke. Do you love her? The question landed like a stone. Alina's lower lip quivered. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the little bracelet made of wooden beads. Evie's bracelet. She clutched it tightly, then broke down, dropping to her knees on the floor. She's everything, she cried. She's the only good thing I've ever done. But I'm poor. I have nothing. No job. No home. I couldn't keep up with the treatments. I couldn't fix her. Her words came in gasps. Raw, guttural pain. I thought if someone like you, someone who has everything, found her, she would survive. Damien watched in silence. His chest ached, remembering the night his own mother walked away. No words, no explanations, just the back of her coat vanishing into darkness. But this woman, this mother, had not run out of apathy. She had run because she was broken. I wasn't abandoning her, Alina continued. I was surrendering to a world that never gave us a chance. For a long moment, Damien said nothing. Then, quietly, he reached for the bracelet she held. His fingers brushed hers. They were ice cold. You held on to this, he said softly. Alina nodded, unable to speak. Outside the room, the officers stood waiting. The case wasn't closed. The law had protocol. She's still under protective care, one officer reminded Damien, until evaluations are complete. Damien turned to Alina. They won't let you see her right away, he said gently. Not until the Child Protection Agency clears it. You'll have to meet with a caseworker, undergo a psychological assessment, show you can provide a stable environment. I will, Alina whispered. I'll do anything. Damien paused. Then, for the first time, his tone softened entirely. She misses you, he said. She never stopped waiting. A sob caught in Alina's throat. I miss her too, she breathed. Every second. I'll keep her safe, Damien promised. Until you can. Alina buried her face in her hands. This time, not from shame, but from a flicker of hope. Damien Hawthorne had never changed a diaper, stirred baby food, or read a children's book aloud. But somehow, none of that mattered now. Every morning, he rose early, well before the stock market opened or his phone buzzed with corporate emergencies, to help Evie begin her physical therapy. He had ordered a pediatric hip abduction brace and spent an entire night watching tutorials on how to fit and adjust it without hurting her fragile hips. Gentle, he whispered to himself as he tightened the final strap. Evie blinked up at him with her wide, solemn eyes. She did not cry. She rarely did. But when Damien held her tiny leg in one hand and guided it through the careful range of motion exercises taught by the doctor, she reached out and clutched the sleeve of his sweater. Soft, trusting, it undid him more than he cared to admit. He ruined the first pot of carrot soup, burnt beyond saving. But the second time, he got it right. Sort of. Evie smiled as she sipped from her small spoon. Tastes good? He asked. She gave the faintest nod, then shyly offered her empty bowl. Her tiny hand now reached for his by default. During therapy, during meals, even when she sat quietly with her wooden bead bracelet, spinning it between her fingers. Each day, Damien watched her become a little less silent, and then, one night, everything changed. Evie had a fever, low, but stubborn. Damien sat beside her bed, changing the cold cloth on her forehead. She stirred in her sleep, her cheeks flushed, hair damp with sweat. "Dada," she murmured. He froze. "Don't go." His heart clenched in a way that scared him. Damien, the man who had never let anyone close, who had sworn long ago he would never become attached, suddenly felt everything he had locked away rising to the surface. He stayed by her side all night, holding her hand gently in his. "Not going anywhere," he whispered. "I promise." Across the city, Alina Marlowe was fighting a battle of her own. Job applications filled her worn-out notebook. Coffee shop after diner after laundry service turned her away. "You've had too many absences," one manager told her. "You look exhausted," another said, eyes scanning her sunken cheeks and dark circles. She left every interview with a heavier heart. Her application to a local daycare center was rejected due to unstable financial history. Her request for a small loan to pay off part of Evie's medical bills was denied within minutes. Alina sat on the cold steps of a church, her hands pressed to her face. "If I don't find work, they won't give her back to me," she whispered into the night. She scribbled a letter requesting visitation with Evie, then tore it up, wrote another, tore that one too. What if Damien refused? What if Evie no longer wanted her? Weeks passed. Evie had a checkup at the hospital. Damien carried her in his arms, carefully wrapping her scarf around her neck to block the cold. From a distance, behind the row of parked cars, Alina stood watching. She could barely see Evie's face, but it was enough. Enough to make her chest tighten, enough to know her daughter was being loved. She pressed her hand to her lips, eyes wet. "Thank you," she whispered, voice breaking. "Thank you for saving my baby." Her feet stayed planted. She did not move forward. She did not call out. Not yet. She returned home, sat at the same desk, and stared at a blank page again. Her fingers trembled as she picked up the pen. "Dear Mr. Hawthorne," she began, "I know I do not deserve kindness, but I want to see my daughter, even if it is just for a moment." She hesitated, then slowly folded the paper, sealed it, but didn't send it. Not yet. The letter arrived in a plain white envelope, smudged from nervous fingers. Damien opened it with his usual precision, expecting another business proposal, until he saw the handwritten lines. "Dear Mr. Hawthorne, I know I made mistakes, but I am still Evie's mother. Please, may I see her? Just once." Alina Marlowe. He sat back in his chair, the paper trembling slightly in his hand. That afternoon, after a long silence, he replied with a single line. "Tomorrow, 3 p.m. You may see her. I'll be there." The next day, Alina stood outside the Hawthorne penthouse, her hands wringing the hem of her old coat. Her blonde hair, though brushed, was windblown. She had tried to look composed, but her eyes gave her away. They were swollen with sleeplessness and fear. Damien opened the door. He did not smile. He did not invite her in. Instead, he stepped aside wordlessly, his presence like a wall between her and the little girl sitting quietly on the floor of the spacious living room. Evie, in her red dress, clean this time, and patched carefully, her wheelchair parked nearby. She was holding a soft teddy bear Damien had bought for her last week. When she looked up, her body stilled. Alina took a hesitant step forward, her lips trembling. Evie stared. Then, very slowly, she raised her tiny hand and patted her chest, right over her heart. "Mommy?" she whispered. Alina fell to her knees. A sob tore from her chest as she crawled forward, burying her face in her daughter's lap. Her hands clutched Evie like she might disappear. Evie's small fingers tangled gently in her hair. Damien turned away, jaw clenched. The tension returned quickly after. Social services had reopened the custody case. Though no formal charges were brought, Alina's abandonment of Evie had placed her under strict scrutiny. Custody was not guaranteed, neither for her nor for Damien. The next meeting with the caseworker was icy. Alina sat upright, clasping the folder of job applications and rejected letters. Her voice was quiet but firm. "I have been working to become stable. I can show documentation. I love my daughter. I never stopped." Damien, standing beside her, did not interrupt. But when the caseworker asked him directly if he intended to seek full guardianship, his voice came out low, controlled. "I want what's best for her. I can give her the medical care she needs, the house, the stability, the treatment plans, and I have already been doing it." Alina's eyes widened. Evie sat between them both, holding her bead bracelet tightly, sensing every unspoken word, her shoulders hunched as if trying to disappear. Damien saw it. He looked at Alina and saw not a negligent mother, but a woman clinging to hope by threads. Her fingers were trembling in her lap. Her lips were bitten red. He remembered what she said that first day. "I just wanted her to have a better chance." He exhaled slowly, turning back to the caseworker. "I am not here to take her away from her mother," he said. "I only want her to heal. I want her to feel safe and loved. If that means we do this together, then I am willing." Alina looked up sharply. Her breath caught. For the first time since the beginning, Damien's voice softened when he looked at her. "I'm not your enemy, Alina." The room fell silent. Evie crawled to the space between them both, her weak leg dragging slightly. She placed one hand in each of theirs. "Please," she whispered. "No more sad." Damien swallowed the lump in his throat. Alina reached for her daughter, and this time, Damien did not stop her. Not everything was solved. Not yet, but for the first time, the war between love and fear found a pause. Damien stood in the hospital hallway, holding a folder thick with medical charts and insurance approvals. Alina sat across from him, wringing her hands, eyes darting from the floor to his face. She had not asked for anything. Not money, not help, but her worry was written all over her. Her fingers trembled every time she looked toward the pediatric wing. Damien finally spoke, voice low, steady. "Evie's next treatment will be covered. Physical therapy, orthotic braces, everything. I've already signed the paperwork." Alina blinked, stunned. "Why would you?" "I don't need a reason," he replied. "She needs it. That's enough." Tears rose in Alina's eyes before she could stop them. Her voice cracked. "You don't know what this means." Damien's gaze softened, just a little. "I think I do." In the weeks that followed, something strange and delicate began to bloom between them. What started as awkward cooperation became an unspoken rhythm, like two people learning to dance to the same music without stepping on each other's feet. Every afternoon, they met at Damien's home. Evie's therapy sessions were scheduled around Damien's meetings. He returned from work, rolled up his sleeves, and sat beside her on the floor as they stretched her legs gently. Alina guided him through the process, correcting his posture, counting with Evie in soft, encouraging tones. "You're bending too fast," Alina would say, her hand gently on his shoulder. Damien would grunt under his breath. "She's more flexible than I thought." Evie giggled, small and pure, watching them both. Other times, it was Alina learning from Damien. When Evie had a tantrum one night, tired from pain and frustration, Alina was at a loss. Damien picked up her favorite storybook, sat on the edge of the bed, and began reading in his calm, even voice. Evie stilled. Later, in the kitchen, Alina whispered, "How did you know that would work?" Damien shrugged, pouring tea into two mismatched mugs. "She listens when people don't talk down to her." Alina stared at him for a moment longer than she meant to. There were other little things too. Alina taught him how to tie Evie's hair into two uneven pigtails. Damien bought a new wheelchair with pink rims and watched Evie's eyes light up as if he had gifted her the moon. Alina caught his smile and looked away before it softened her too much. One evening, Evie sat between them on a picnic blanket in the rooftop garden. The sun dipped low, casting golden light across Damien's usually sharp features. He was laughing at something Evie had said. and Alina found herself watching him, not with wariness, but with quiet gratitude. "She smiles more now," Alina said. "She has reasons to," Damien replied. Alina looked down at her hands. "I never thought, after everything, that someone would help us like this." Damien didn't answer right away. He leaned back on his palms, eyes on the city skyline. "I used to think people only helped when they wanted something in return. And now?" she asked. He glanced at her. "Now I think some things are worth giving just because they matter." Alina blinked fast, overwhelmed by emotion. Evie, nestled between them, rested her head on Damien's shoulder and reached for Alina's hand. The three of them sat in silence, connected by something deeper than words. In time, Alina found herself laughing more. Damien listened more. Evie grew stronger, both in body and spirit. The lonely CEO who once measured life in profit margins now measured it in giggles, warm meals, and bedtime routines. The mother who once believed she was too broken to raise her child now stood taller, her voice steadier. They were not perfect, but they were becoming something neither of them expected. A team, a partnership, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of a family. And for the first time in a long time, none of them felt alone. The recovery room was quiet, bathed in soft white light. Machines beeped steadily, and the faint scent of antiseptic hung in the air. Damien stood at the foot of the bed, hands in his pockets, watching as Evie slowly opened her eyes. Alina sat beside her, gently stroking her daughter's hair. The surgery had gone well. The doctors were optimistic. With therapy and time, Evie would walk, maybe not like other children, but she would walk. Weeks passed. One afternoon, in the rehab center, Evie stood between two metal bars. Her legs wobbled. Her grip was weak, but she was standing, truly standing, for the first time in her life. Alina gasped and clutched her hands over her mouth. Damien, holding one of Evie's hands, said softly, "You're doing it, sweetheart. You're doing it." Evie grinned, unsteady but proud. "Look, Mommy, I'm big now." Alina rushed forward, tears streaming down her face, and hugged them both. Her hands met Damien's at Evie's back. They didn't let go. Later that night, back in Damien's penthouse, Alina was helping Evie settle in for bed. A new bookshelf full of colorful stories stood in the corner. The room smelled faintly of lavender and warmth. Damien waited just outside, something hidden behind his back. When Alina stepped out, he handed her a small wooden box. "What's this?" she asked, puzzled. Damien looked uncharacteristically nervous. "Open it." Inside was Evie's beaded bracelet, the one Alina had made years ago, now resting inside a hand-carved box with a tiny engraving on the lid. 3 small hearts, linked together. Damien cleared his throat. "I know your family has been through too much pain, but if you'll let me, I'd like to help build something new. With you, with her, something real." Alina stared at him, speechless. The box trembled slightly in her hands. Her throat tightened as tears filled her eyes. Different tears this time. Not from grief, but from a love so gentle it nearly undid her. She whispered, "Are you sure?" He nodded once. "I've never been more." Alina stepped forward, resting her forehead against his chest. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Just then, Evie called from the doorway, dragging her stuffed bunny. "Mommy, Daddy, can we stay together now?" They both turned. Damien bent down, lifting her gently. "Always." Alina kissed her daughter's forehead and smiled through her tears. Evie yawned, eyes already heavy. "We stay together, right?" Damien and Alina glanced at each other, then replied in unison, "Right, sweetheart." As the morning light spilled across the living room floor, touching the pictures on the wall, the books on the shelves, and the little shoes by the door, one thing was clear. This was no longer a house, it was home, built not on perfection, but on kindness, on second chances, on love. Thank you for watching this emotional journey of love.